Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1142 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. You know, it's crazy that a lot of people went into this arc thinking that it's not going to be that long, maybe like a 40 chapter arc, something like that, something more reminiscent of the pre-time skip. And then we actually got here and it kind of feels like we're taking a stroll. It's been what, 6-7 hours over 15 chapters? Oda is taking his sweet ass time. Well, after this chapter, I really do not see Elbaf topping 100. It might end up being a big arc. I could see 70, 80, but 15 chapters in, and now the arc is going. We are officially in the chaos phase. But yeah, I have some things to talk about with this chapter, so without further ado. So just to cut to the chase, in this chapter, we get to see the God's Knight's first move. We already know that they intended on capturing giant children. They sure were quick to begin. It isn't precisely explained what has happened, but I think that it's implied that Killingham has put some of the children from Walrus School to sleep. And now they are sleepwalking. And at the same time that they are asleep and are sleepwalking, their nightmares are becoming reality. Literally, the things from their worst nightmares are ravaging Elbaf. Absolute peak panel, by the way. I literally just made a theory video. I'll go ahead and link it in the description. But one of the things that we commonly talked about in that video was Punk Hazard, and specifically the children of Punk Hazard. Basically, the theory was that the country of Elbaf itself changes people and has the potential to give people hallucinations. Almost like there is a special kind of drug that exists within Elbaf and also Sky Islands, which could be related to Caesar's experiments. And I compared that to what has happened to Big Mom and also the children of Punk Hazard. But yeah, even more than that, it's almost eerie. One of the important speculations from that video is that in Elbaf, your dreams or your nightmares become reality. For some people, this may lead to hallucinations, which is something I've been trying to speculate literally since we started this damn arc. Like a kid playing that block game, you know, where you have holes in the shape of a square or a circle or a triangle, and I'm a kid like trying to fit the triangle into the circle, but I swear it fits. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that what happened in this chapter is not a great surprise to me. Literally, this is what I thought would happen from very near the very beginning of this arc. But the way that it is happening is certainly not in the way that I speculate. But you're not gonna find me giving up so easily. Look, one of my knee-jerk reactions to this chapter, which I think itself poses questions, is a lot of the events and a lot of the things of this chapter remind me a lot of Punk Hazard and the children. And not just because children are involved in the story. If you guys take yourself back to Punk Hazard, an interesting parallel with Elbaf is that when the Strats arrived on the island pretty soon thereafter, sleeping gas was used on them. Sound familiar, yeah? And it is because of this that these Strats were imprisoned, which has happened again in Elbaf. It's also interesting to me that Punk Hazard is tangentially related to Elbaf just because we know that one of the primary functions of this island based on the symbol that we see there is experimentation regarding giantification. One of the first things that Luffy and crew discover is a gigantic melting skull of a continent puller. But anyway, once the half of the crew that fell asleep because of sleeping gas wake up, they then quickly meet the children of Punk Hazard in the biscuit room. These children are obviously a continuation of the world government's experiments regarding giantification because the children are giant. The children then ask to be freed, and in order to do that, the Strats have to fight men in gas masks who use sleeping gas as their primary weapon. What this tells you is that in order for Caesar and his minions to deal with the children, their weapon of choice is sleeping gas. So I would imagine that you would have commonly seen them put the children to sleep. Once again, seems familiar, yeah? Killingham is also depicted wearing a gas mask. The whole reason why they use the sleeping gas is because they didn't actually want to harm the children, but there are times when the children would suffer from withdrawal and then become monsters. There's some really interesting panels from Punk Hazard where Caesar effectively used his candy like a hook in these children's mouths. They weren't exactly sleepwalking, but they kind of resembled zombies, almost lifeless. Caesar would dangle the promise of candy to get the children to do what he wanted or go where he wanted. I want to be explicitly clear, okay? Different things are happening, but the two scenarios are similar. And I think that if we dip into the realm of speculation, the similarities would be even more apparent. In this chapter, we can see that the teacher wolf has been attacked, and it's kind of a mystery of like who or what attacked him. But if there's any clue as to what the truth is, I think that it's this line from him. Do not touch the children. Why did he say that? Why shouldn't we touch the children? And my god phrasing. Anywho, my theory is that Wolf was not actually attacked by members of the God's Knights. Wolf was attacked by the children. If you touch them while they are in this dreamlike state, for whatever reason, they go feral. So this works on a number of levels with Punk Hazard. It was ultimately the candy which made the children of Punk Hazard violent. Likewise, I think that it's likely that whatever the God's Knights are doing to the children in Elbaf, it is also making them violent. It's also inverted from Punk Hazard in a way, because Caesar used the candy to control the children and prevent them from being violent. Well, it seems like part of the dream powers going on here is literally intended to ensure that they are violent. All of this may very well lead to a very overt parallel, because in Punk Hazard, how the Strats ultimately dealt with the children is they tried to chain them up. And if the children of Elbaf are being violent when you touch them, then they're going to have a problem dealing with this until they understand it, so you might see these children get chained up just the same. But while I think that all of this is really interesting, the reason why it's important is why exactly would Oda be paralleling what's going on here in Elbaf with Punk Hazard? Yes, we have children involved here, but it's kind of not creative to do the same thing again, unless it holds meaning. Oda literally wants us to think about the events in Punk Hazard while we're reading this arc. Maybe there's an element of science in Elbaf that might come up. I'm sure you all forgot that Vegapunk is here, but for Vegapunk to actually have a reason to be here, then you would need some science involved in some way, yeah? I think so. Also, as a fun fact, the one who ultimately cured the children of Punk Hazard was Vegapunk. So look guys, I'm not saying that Vegapunk is going to cure the Elbaf children from what is happening here, because I think it's literally the powers of a devil fruit. The whole purpose of this is to remind you of the theory that I made just the other day. Something strange about the country of Elbaf. And Punk Hazard might very well be related. I don't mean to go off forever, but I really want to put into perspective how eerie this chapter was for me. It is really common for me to be partly right. I am rarely always right about everything, unless we're really close to a reveal and we have everything that we need to know. And in the same token, I'm very rarely wrong about everything. I tend to be very good at finding things from the story which are important. But kind of my nature is that I pursue ambitious theories where we don't have everything that we need to know, and I fill in the gaps with a lot of logic and creative elements that, you know, it's a bit early. I get bored when the theory is too simple. So you'll see me mention it in my chapter reviews, but not make an entire video about it, unless I can utilize it to say something that I think is actually new. But anyway, what I'm trying to get to is that it has never happened before that I am entirely right about something for the wrong reasons. At least I don't think that that's happened. But if you listen to my review, I think this was the second chapter of Elbaf when the Strats had basically just arrived in the diorama. What I speculated in that video is like 100% what we got in this chapter. Obviously without knowledge of the God's Knights or their devil fruit abilities. Essentially the theory was that in Elbaf, nightmares come to life. And my justification for this theory was twofold. Firstly, we'd recently been introduced to Fairy Green and the idea of hallucinations was fresh on mind. I was really hoping that Elbaf would be a dream world. And it stuck out to me as important that we had just left Egghead. We knew that Vegapunk had history in Elbaf. We also knew that all of Vegapunk's experiments and technology was based off of other things. And so there was one element of Egghead that remained kind of unexplored and unexplained, which was the holograms. Remember how impressive Egghead was when we first visited because of all sorts of crazy monsters in the background that weren't actually there, they were holograms. But at the same time, Dr. Vegapunk seemed to want to interact with these holograms, was developing technology to make it seem like you could fight them. Basically, he was looking to make dreams real. But the basis for this research, the reason why Vegapunk was inspired, hadn't been explained to us. Honestly, outside of the introduction in Egghead, the holograms were essentially ignored. And I thought to myself, what if this was all based on Elbaf? He saw something similar in Elbaf. But what made this theory really easy at the time was the cat that we met in the castle. Because the cat spontaneously transformed into a lion. Even to this day, we don't fully understand how the cat actually did that? A lot of people say, well, it's just the cat had a devil fruit. And I will acknowledge that sometimes the simple answer is the correct one. But to me, it seems like a massive waste of what could be a very cool fruit. Just give it to a random fodder creature at the beginning of Elbaf, simply to mess with us and think that Elbaf might be a dream world, trolling on another level. So if you assume that the cat does not have a devil fruit, then you could speculate that Nami and Usopp were still drunk after drinking Fairy Green. Fairy Green here is like the key that unlocks the dream world. This was the hallucination that the giants warned us about. But if that's the case, then there's a lot of other things that we could potentially learn about this experience. The hallucination was not contained in the mind of just one Strad, because Nami and Usopp both saw the same thing. So if it's a hallucination, they are sharing it. And the other thought that I had was the timing of the cat's transformation was interesting, because it seemed to transform into a lion when both Nami and Usopp were scared. So rather than dreams becoming reality, in this case, it's like nightmares are becoming reality. And then it becomes interesting when the lion transforms back into the cat, it's after it is defeated by Zoro and Luffy. When the nightmare is defeated, Nami and Usopp are no longer afraid, and the cat returns to what it actually is, not what they imagined it to be. So yeah, I guess right now we're living in interesting times, because the introduction of the Gods Knights and what appears to be their devil fruit powers is kind of overlapping with what we thought might actually happen in the country of Elbaf innately in some circumstances. Obviously, we don't know exactly how it works, but if you want to believe, and I do, that Fairy Green actually will do something in this arc, then how exactly do we know that it's doing anything when Killingham is here with powers that do the same thing? You guys understand what I'm saying? Usopp in particular has literally been partying and has been consuming Fairy Green, so him hallucinating, as the giants warned, would make a lot of sense. But he's already seeing things out of people's imaginations, or will shortly. That could be confusing. So honestly, I am wondering out loud if that is exactly the point. If Fairy Green is about to have a role in this arc, we may not know when it is happening. In a twisted way, Killingham and the Gods Knights having these powers makes me feel like my theory is more justified than it was previously, just because it stupidly overlaps. And there's a possibility that Oda foreshadowed this at the end of the chapter. Because right now, the way that we understand these powers is that it's important that the children are asleep, and while they're asleep, somehow, some way, they can bring their nightmares to life. But at the end of the chapter, Saint Summers asks Gunko what Gunko fears, and Gunko says Nika. Her fears can't possibly come to life though, not unless Killingham puts her to sleep. So maybe Oda is suggesting that other people's fears, not just the children, may come to life. The way that I picture this in my head as an epic moment is that right now, obviously, all of the things are from the children's imaginations. But once these creatures show up to the party, and everybody who has been drinking, I want to highlight Usopp. Somebody like Usopp's imagination might conjure fears as well, without directly being influenced by the devil fruits. But I want to make sure that I say this. I don't think that Elbaf is purely a world where nightmares come to life. I think that it has to be dreams as well. And this could potentially lead us back to Gunko's fear. All of the drunk people are in for a pretty spectacular surprise when all of these monsters show up, and I imagine that the first instinct of basically everyone will be panic and fear. But given enough time, and especially if they learn exactly how the Gods Knight's powers work, you could see this reverse. The island as a whole wishes for Nika's help. And obviously that'll be Luffy, but they might conjure something as well. But anyway, I think I said what I wanted to say here. We will keep this in mind as chapters continue, and I will bring it up if it seems relevant or if it makes sense to. But outside of my absurd headcanon, right, the reality is that what is happening in this chapter seems exclusively to be devil fruit abilities. So let's talk more about those. Honestly, usually I'm a bit better than this. When I see somebody who has a fruit, especially if they're already transformed, I have a pretty good guess as to what this fruit is or what creature they are. But I really don't know what Killingham is. If you guys have any ideas, please share them in the comments. The key words to me are he looks like a dragon, and it seems to have some power over sleep and dreams or nightmares. But wouldn't it be a crazy twist if Killingham's appearance is a total red herring? It's kind of interesting that he showed up already transformed into his devil fruit, and we have yet to see his actual appearance. So the possibility remains that this is his actual appearance. But yeah, if you compare Killingham to anybody in the story or any power that we've seen, what he resembles the most is Momonosuke as a tiny dragon. You could actually bring this back to Dr. Vegapunk and Vegapunk's experiments trying to recreate Kaido's devil fruit. Killingham received some prototype that was heavily flawed. So rather than being a zone with transformations and a hybrid form, he is literally trapped looking like this. I just want to throw that out there because we'll definitely find out whether or not this is true because Vegapunk is literally here. Lilith would know. And this would also potentially be an awesome segue to other experiments that Vegapunk has been a part of that have been less highlighted in the story. Guys, I have serious questions about Blackbeard. Why is Blackbeard the way that he is? Why doesn't Blackbeard sleep? I want you to think about that for a moment. Blackbeard does not sleep. It seems very interrelated to what is occurring right now with the children and with the God's Knights. But the short story here, and this is a theory that has existed for a long time, and one that I personally subscribe to, that as a child, Blackbeard was an experiment of the world government. He is able to consume more than one devil fruit because that was entirely the point of the experimentation. And I think that the popular theory in this regard is that within Blackbeard, Rock's soul still exists. Blackbeard effectively has an alternate persona, which is Rock's D. Zebek. The way that the headcanon goes is that there is supposed to be one devil fruit per person, or you can think of it like one devil fruit per soul. But you stick another person's soul inside of a body so that they have more than one. That person could then consume more than one devil fruit. It would then also make sense that when one of these souls or people fall asleep, then the other aspect of them would wake up, explaining why Blackbeard does not sleep. Personally, I think that this as an idea works really well because we know that the world government has aggressively pursued various ways of making stronger soldiers. We are literally looking at the Seraphim right now. So approximately 40 years ago, they were looking for ways to infuse multiple devil fruits inside of their soldiers. And I just want to point out for a moment, because it seems relevant, that if this happened to Blackbeard, this occurred when he was a child. The world government literally experimented on a child, which seems particularly evil because there's a whole host of criminals that they could have done this to. I don't think that Dr. Vegapunk is evil, but if he is responsible for these kinds of experimentations, he likely had a reason. Like, for example, it only worked on children. Similar to Caesar in The Children of Punk Hazard, the giantification only worked on children. And this takes us back to Killingham, which is essentially one of the top tier soldiers of the world government. Guys, if they discover that the Blackbeard experiment worked, it would then make a lot of sense for them to apply it to people that they would deem to be more worthy or more loyal, such as celestial dragons as kids like Killingham. Or you can even drift way off into the abyss that Killingham as a child was not actually a celestial dragon and the experiment worked on him and he was effectively adopted and brainwashed. He is purely a weapon. But yeah, the reason that we're going down this rabbit hole is if we assume that Killingham has eaten an artificial dragon devil fruit similar to Momonosuke, but a prototype, but also has sleep or dream-related powers as well. These powers are not associated with Kaido or Momonosuke as a dragon, and it opens up the possibility that Killingham actually has two different kinds of fruit. Basically, the first guy who is like Blackbeard, but not Blackbeard. This may seem wild to you, but I do think that Oda has already incorporated clues that the God's Knights utilize devil fruit technology. As an example, Shamrock's sword is a sword that has consumed a devil fruit, a technology that we know that Vegapunk was responsible for, and the God's Knights are now using. We've also recently been introduced to Gunko, and Gunko has some strange things going on with her eyes, which makes you think that maybe Gunko has also been experimented on. So it's probably about right now that we should think about all of the God's Knights in some way or some form, utilizing technology that Vegapunk has created. Essentially, Vegapunk over time experimented on a lot of fodder and a lot of criminals and developed technology which was always intended to be given to loyal soldiers of the world government, the God's Knights. But anyway, there's an interesting moment in this chapter where we know that the children went to sleep and their nightmares were conjured, but then almost suddenly they all collapsed. We then get this very, very strange panel from Killingham where he says, "All right, that should do it." And then it's like he falls asleep. There's this other version of him in the panel that seems almost ghost-like. But then we go to the next panel and he's perfectly awake. The way that I intuitively want to read this is actually reversed. Remember, you're supposed to read manga right to left. So first, Killingham is asleep, then he wakes up and has a conversation with the other gods' knights. But it's almost as if Oda drew this panel incorrectly, where he's awake, says, all right, that should do it, falls asleep, and then in the next panel is just awake. But I think that Oda is better at his job than that. If the panel is drawn the wrong way, it's literally a rookie mistake that I just don't believe that Oda would do, and certainly does not do. So my theory is that Killingham might have powers that would remind you of Brook, and that Brook might be important in some way in fighting him. I'm wondering if the Killingham that we see that appears to look a lot like a ghost, seems shaded differently, is literally a soul version of him. Detached from his body in a soul-related form, he can interact with the children and potentially dreamwalk inside of their minds. That alone could potentially remind you of Brook, but the other interesting element of this is when the children all collapsed simultaneously. Guys, this happened immediately after Elbaf blew its horn to warn the entire island. While people don't think about horns as being music, a lot of people don't really think about bells, like the bell from Skypiea, that being music either. But it was. So I think that it is possible that Oda is foreshadowing how to combat Killingham's powers. Music. This also has a basis in various mythologies. You can think about Greek mythology in Orpheus, or even Norse mythology in Bragi. In many different cultures and mythology, music is used to enter a dream state or a trance state. So then likewise, it would make sense for music to be used to break people out of the same thing. When Elbaf blew the horn, they broke the spell for a very small moment. And at the end of the chapter, as we pan back to Killingham, why we see the ghost is because Killingham reapplied the ability. But yeah, obviously I'm just thinking out loud, but another way in which this kind of piques my curiosity is this is obviously an arc about Nika. It's also about religion and faith. So a big part of the known faith of Nika is dancing like a fool, doing the Nika dance, which also has an accompanied song. So it would be kind of fitting, you gotta admit, it'd be kind of fitting that in order to fight the nightmares that the God's Knights are conjuring, praying to Nika or doing the dance could actually have some effect. And I also want to throw out that it is my headcanon that just like horns could be music and bells can be music, laughter is also designated as a kind of music in the world of One Piece. So you could have some Harry Potter vibes in this arc as well, where you literally laugh at your fears, like the Boggart. Symbolically, it is a very powerful gesture to vanquish your fears by laughing at them. But even if it doesn't play out exactly like this, I am very curious as to whether or not Brook could have an important role in this arc. Honestly, so far, Brook has been ignored more than any other Straw Hat. He has literally done nothing. I'm hopeful that Oda is aware. But yeah, I would say that the last way that this chapter made me think is one of the children's fears or dreams, I'm not entirely sure, was about Loki's hammer. One of the children argued that it's Loki who can use his hammer to destroy the world, and there's an argument. And then in the very same chapter, we see the actual Loki do this. Use his hammer to set fire to the world tree Yggdrasil, or treasure tree Adam. Again, not entirely sure if we're supposed to take this literally or symbolically, like, I'm not sure, right? But this is a literal example of one of the children's fears coming to life, not because of devil fruit powers literally bringing their imagination into creating a creature, right? But like, this is literally what is happening. And we 100% know that this is going to happen again because Gunko fears Nika. And Luffy is Nika, and Luffy is here. So in Elbaf, Gunko's fear is literally going to happen. So take this however you want to, I just want to point it out. But I guess I'm on high alert as to what everyone actually fears, and beyond whatever magic or powers might be going on here, I'm curious if they actually happen. Like as an example, the destruction of Treasure Tree Adam in the country of Elbaf, I 100% think is going to happen. Literally. I think that it's also true that the majority of giants in Elbaf feared the release of Loki, and again, that is literally happening. While you might think that I'm crazy for bringing all of these things up, I believe in the inherited will. I think that it actually works out that in the story of One Piece, as the people collectively desire for something, it eventually becomes reality. The people's collective dreams matter. I think that it has a tangible effect on the world. This could apply to fears as well. And even more confusingly, specific to the country of Elbaf, many of the giants actually dream for the destruction of the world. That is, while it's a fear, it's also what they think should happen, what they are rooting for. So yeah, I'm just gonna stop there and just leave you to think about this. But just to make sure that we talk about this before we end the video, I think Loki was incredibly cool in this chapter. And if you've been following the conversation on the channel for a while, you know that the common discussion with Loki is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? It seems unclear, and that is definitely the point. The children's conversation in this chapter make it abundantly clear, right? It's Loki, he can use his hammer to destroy the world. The one that's gonna do that is Nika. Many of the giants have it in their mind that Nika is going to destroy the world, and they worship Nika, they believe in Nika, not because they are evil, but they view the destruction of the world as necessary. Following Norse mythology, they believe that once the world is destroyed, it will be reborn better than it was before. So Loki believes himself to be Nika, and as he is destroying the tree, it is not necessarily a good or evil action. If he is Nika, this might be what he is supposed to do. And I just want to throw in here that, again, in the last video that I made, one of our theories or speculations is that destroying Adam Tree might actually be for the best, something that we as fans should root for, because the tree is in effect diseased and hurting the people of Elbaf. But yeah, I would say that my gut feeling is that Loki is not successful in destroying Treasure Tree Adam. The fire start, that's a big deal, but it's potentially a problem that they can solve. I actually think by the conclusion of this arc, the person that officially destroys the tree will be Luffy. So Nika will fulfill the prophecy and officially destroy the world of Elbaf. Perhaps you can think of it in a similar way as Luffy in Fishman Island destroying the Noah, which I believe is very likely to have been made from Adam's wood. Now, I'm sure that the way that most people imagine this is that Treasure Tree Adam is literally on fire, it's difficult to put the fires out, so then Luffy is forced to destroy the entire tree. But I also have Noland in mind as well. Noland cut down these sacred trees in Jaya on purpose, because the trees themselves were dangerous. So I wouldn't be shocked if it plays out that Luffy ends up destroying the tree, while the giants of Elbaf don't entirely understand why he would be doing that. So they might see it as a betrayal, and we might relive the Nolan and Kagura flashback, the relationship between Nolan and the actual inhabitants of Jaya. Honestly, all of this makes a lot of sense to me right now, because that is where we're tracking in the story, right? Luffy and Zoro have now freed Loki, things are about to get crazy, and the giants are going to have a very skewed perception of him because of what has already happened. And to me, that is interesting. But yeah, talking more about Loki, I feel like at some point in time, he's just got to keel over, right? The damage that he took from Shamrock should have been near fatal. He's standing right now, and that is really impressive. We have never seen Luffy do anything while touching Sea Stone, but Loki is doing more than just something. I kind of expect them to take off his last cuff to save the tree. But after that, what happens? Is it possible that Loki just keels over? And then Luffy ends up arguing with Hyruden and the other giants about whether they should kill him right there where he stands, or heal him. Because I feel like that could be a powerful moment. None of them may understand this, and this includes Luffy, but Luffy is a savant at reading people. So what Luffy does next could be really telling about his general perception of Loki, his feel about Loki's character. We kind of already know that Luffy is going to overlook a lot of things because he wants to know what Loki knows about Shanks. But certainly what is happening now should be a pretty great test to see exactly just how far Luffy would go. And if he does decide to free Loki and heal Loki even after this, he may not have a problem with just the giants. He may have a problem with Zoro as well. This is kind of what I hope will happen, but I guess we'll see. But yeah, I think that is everything that I had to say today. As always, I'm curious as to what you guys think, whether you noticed something from the chapter that I might have missed. Just share your thoughts. If you're interested, check out my book, The Booms. Link is in the description. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.